Political unrest all over the globe, protests cropping up in major cities everywhere, mistrust in the government at an all-time high, medical mandates far and wide sweeping with indiscriminate implications, peaceful political protesters being manhandled and thrown into the back of vans, normal everyday people being demonized ritually in the media, intentional, malicious misrepresentation of entire segments of the population being broadcast into your home every night. You'd definitely be forgiven for thinking this was the plot to some new dystopian movie. Australia. She'll be right, mate. Doesn't fucking look like it, eh? I don't have any answers. And I don't claim to. I don't know what's right for anyone. I don't even know what's right for me right now. But I sure as hell have some questions. So why is it, while millionaires and billionaires everywhere are chucking inconceivable amounts of money at research on how they can live longer or be cryogenically frozen until such time as said research is successful, meanwhile, citizens all over the world are being denied the right to hear, let alone discuss, information about possible long-term effects of certain medical procedures on our bodies. Some of those procedures are being morally and in some cases even legally inflicted upon us. Now this phenomenon, which many have called dystopian shunning of public discourse on very specific matters, crystallizes into a sinister monster which proves very difficult to posture within any kind of morally acceptable narrative. Just a few short years ago, if something was considered a fact, that meant quite little in reality. When it was highlighted here in Australia with the class action a few years ago, where the major banks were taken to court and had to return millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, to their customers that were taken in means that were deemed by the courts to be deceitful, misleading, ultimately malpractice. So it's hard to argue against the fact that, by all accounts, for all intents and purposes, is bad, wrong. Yeah? Yet, thanks to convenient and seemingly never-ending system of loopholes in that law, this behavior, the same behavior, continues today, unbridled by any legal process. So you could conclude from that quite comfortably that fact does not determine law. Fast forward a decade or so, forget that it seems like the set of equilibrium, or the fact that the left and right hold little, if any, meaning in regards to political parties' allegiances, or that the meaning of left and right has changed so far from what it did at the end of World War II that my grandfather, who fought for our freedom, would be, he'd be spinning in his grave, mate. Liberal or Labor is no guise by which to decide who wishes you harm anymore, and far less who stands for your rights. Just the fact that Victoria is a Labor situation is probably where that's most apparent. But all over the world, not just in Victoria, lawmakers donned the role of fact makers. And they followed this through with an undiscussed shift to undiscussed policies, and to even touch on certain topics in public conversation could be considered social suicide for most. When did law become dismissible? When did any of us vote for a government who campaigned any intent for your basic human rights to be taken away and need to be earned back? And when did the world decide that despite ever-advancing social education systems, suddenly no degree, experience, any true basis for belief was enough to deem somebody worthy of discussing these topics? One brush. You're all stupid. You need to sit, shut up, and do as you're told. That's where we're at. The laws that once protected you no longer do. The science that got us through history to where we were before all of this It's deemed inadmissible, in some cases outright wrong, contrary to the facts. But those facts, they're not really any longer facts, are they? They're not facts as we used to know it. Fact makers decide facts now, behind closed doors with their financial and other interests, and the law sheepishly follows. This isn't a world I thought I was bringing my son into.